While we're taking this on, we might also want to take a look at approving like purchases for them for a period of up to 5 years, like we have done on some other things that are effectively routine maintenance. They just happen to hit the pricing amount that needs to come to us. So, are there any questions on that? I'm sure that possibly that will be for you. You guys know.
No. I mean, I don't think his request for UV lamps needs to come before the.
Well, I don't think so either.
I mean,
frankly, I'm not sure that, I get it because of the dollar figure, but
Yeah.
this is routine maintenance.
The one thing that wasn't really clear to me is he talked about the 10,000 hours, and he said one bank, but he didn't say how long the 36 lamps would last. Not that it really matters, not that I'm holding it up, I was just curious more than anything. How long the 36 lasts, but there's no reason to hold it up, just curiosity.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, pleasure of the board on this. First, on the purchase of the 36.
I'll move to award a contract to Trojan UV under sole source purchase provision of the purchasing policy for the purchase of 36 UV 4000 disinfection lamps for wastewater treatment facility at a total cost of $20,160.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. And would the board like to, continue?
Sorry. I also want to move in accordance with the recurring purchases provision of the purchasing policy. I move to authorize staff to direct future purchases of UV lamps for the wastewater treatment facility to Trojan UV for a period of 5 years or until the board chooses to initiate a new bid process.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments on this particular one?
Just I hope if the price changes significantly, I'm sure Bob will come back to us on it.
Okay. Duly noted. Okay, all in favor then signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I think it's froze.
Nick?
It's frozen.
Yeah. Did everybody else say aye?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So then we're going to move on and we'll register Nick's vote. Nick, did you vote on the UV recurrent purchases? Okay. Next is approval of sole source purchase of an influent valve for the wastewater treatment facility. Again, Bob's bringing this to us. Purchase an electrically activated influent valve for the wastewater treatment facility from Atlantic Fluid Technology of West Boylston, Mass. Under the sole source exception provision of the purchasing policy at a total cost of $5,944. And this is the same vendor quoted for the price that the board approved on April 13th of this year. Bob notes that this is the third of 4 scheduled purchase requests that he will be making to replace all of the influent valves at the plant at a rate of 1 per year. While the purchase expense will impact the FY22 budget, installation will be scheduled for the following budget year, he says. Thoughts on that? Any questions? Again, I believe it's kind of routine maintenance item.
Although I think these are the first time we get a long life out of them, I believe.
Longer life,
Because the
yeah.
first time they've been replaced since we did the plan, so. Anyway, I'll move to award a contract to Atlantic Fluid Technology under the sole source exception provision of the purchasing policy for the purchase of an electrically activated influent valve for the wastewater treatment facility at a total cost of $5,944.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
In accordance with the reoccurring purchases provision of the purchasing policy. It's like a new tongue twister. I further move to authorize staff to acquire the fourth and final influent valve from Atlantic Fluid Technology in accordance with the agreed upon replacement schedule.
Second.
Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor of authorizing that fourth purchase now, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. So I guess we're at the e-scooter discussion. So if Chief Hanley could join us, that would be great. Chief?
Good evening.
So we're at the item number 8 on the e-scooter recommendation. So do you want to walk us through what the Public Health and Safety Committee discussed in the recommendation?
Yeah, we actually started this back in March when we got a proposal from Bird Scooters to start a program here in Middlebury. We did some research on it. We got information from Montpelier and some other places where the scooters have been in use. Montpelier had a 60-day program. It started and it ended, and they didn't renew it. There were some concerns about the management of the scooters being left around. This was in 2018, by the way, so it's over 3 years ago. We had a discussion back at the June Public Health and Safety Committee meeting, and there was no movement one way or the other to recommend this. Of course, we only had 5 members of the committee there at the time. So we moved it up to the September 20th meeting. We had a pretty good discussion. I got a number of letters or emails of support, which I read into the record from folks in town who were wanted to see this program go. Earlier at the June meeting, we had a couple of folks there who were opposed to this because of, as I said, the management issues, less on the actual operation and use of the scooters alone. Jeremy is on the line, I believe, and he can explain some of the management changes and some of the oversight that they've done in lesson learning on how to improve this. So at that meeting, we made a motion to recommend the town license Bird scooters.
Okay, thank you, Chief. The board have any comments or questions or discussion on this?
I think I'll support it, but I have some concerns because after the emails I saw today about what happened in Montpelier, I don't know the track record of this company. So I'm still going to support because this makes sense, but I'll be cautious.
And is there anything specific in that cautiousness that you would like to see in either an agreement or in?
The only thing I can go back to is the Montpelier where it did not work out. Some of them say it was a mess. People leaving scooters all over the sidewalks and stuff. That's the only concern. I still very much like to see them. But the good thing is we're not tied into a long-term contract. We can decide if we don't want to go with it, if we don't like it.
Yeah.
I might add that this is would come under licensing for the board, and licenses can be issued. They can also be revoked if they don't meet the terms of the operating agreement or the MOU. And there will be an MOU, which we can iron out some of the details over the fall and winter if we're going to start this next year, to try to make sure we've got some control over this in the event it gets out of hand.
I agree.
Yeah, I think a lot of the concerns that people has to do with the management piece.
Right.
So as long as it's managed well, I think it's a good thing to try. As long as we can revoke it if it becomes a problem.
I thought Bill Cunningham's email was really helpful, and he brought up some interesting concerns and suggestions that I hadn't thought of, and I think I'm sort of in the same boat as Farhad. I think I'd like to see us try them, but I do have some concerns, like some of the things Bill mentioned in his comment about some of the places locally where he might have gotten some feedback on how things were going. They haven't been there very long. So I think it's difficult to really get some feedback. So we try it here and see how it goes. And see what happens and hope that no one gets hurt.
Just to note briefly that Jeremy Lynch is on the line now, the bird scooter representative, if anybody has any questions for him.
On the line.
I can promote list if you'd like.
It might be good, just so. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, everybody.
I don't know if you've been watching it. We're having a discussion about the proposal to license e-scooter rentals for Middlebury here. And so we appreciate you joining us so that the board has an opportunity if they have questions, or certainly any of the people that are here. I think I see at least a couple that are here for this particular. So.
If I may, I think the one comment that someone had about just trying it in a lot of markets, that's what our perspective has been as well. And when I'm talking to some towns in like Andalusia or Bruton or Monroeville in the southern part of Alabama, where they really have like 5,000-6,000 people, it is a shot in the dark for us to see if it's successful. They were interested in giving it a shot to see if it could work. So I concur. I think it's worth giving it the shot to see how it works. If it does, great. If it doesn't work, again, that'll be something that you will notice it, and so will we. If we're not getting the rides and it's not producing, the amount of revenue that makes the fleet manager be interested in running the program, we would be in the same boat as you guys, as saying maybe this isn't the right fit. And we're okay with that too. I just think it is an opportunity with the community and with the college. I think there is an opportunity for it to be successful. But again, I'm happy with just giving it a shot and see how we do.
Any other comments from the board or questions? Nick or Dan, did you have anything?
No, I'm good. I sat in on, I'm on the committee, so I've heard all these and read it, and I think it's worth trying, and again, we'll see how it goes.
One of the things that was brought up in Bill Cunningham's note to us was the lighting, and now it's dark, so we could potentially see it, but we don't really have one. Jeremy, what's the quality of the light on the scooters that would be coming in, and is it maybe prudent to limit the evening hours if that's a safety concern?
The light is actually very bright, and it's on all the time when the ride is, even if it's daylight, the front headlight is on. It's very bright. You can see very easily down the road. There's reflectors on either side of the front wheel and back wheel, and the deck itself. There's light on the deck. And then the tail light is always illuminated in red. And then when you press the brake pedal, actually it blinks red at night. So even during the day, you can see it. It's very easily seen at night.
Okay. Now I know Peg, you're here, and Laura, you're here for this. Do either of you have questions or comments that you would like to make? Why don't you come on up and
so I would like Jeremy to also explain to you, I think, Jeremy, that the end of the program in Montpelier wasn't because of nuisance, even though there was some of that. It was because there just weren't enough rides that were being used. So it was a mutual decision, as Jeremy is saying. And he has told me that there are at least 30 cities kind of our size where this is happening right now. And I think I'd like him to speak to that, if you could, Jeremy.
Yeah, so regarding Montpelier, that was just a pilot that they were interested in as well, to us to get into as well as we were. It wasn't just something that was picked out of the hat. It was a place that was interested in trying, and then for us, this was in 18, some port of 18, maybe beginning of 19, but mostly probably was 18. And it was new for us because our operating model back then was a lot of scooters, a warehouse, multiple employees on the ground working to manage that program. And Montpelier just clearly was not going to be that market for us, or we wouldn't be able to, at that stage, have to put in several hundred to make it work because we needed the volume, the warehouse, all the other capital expenditure. It really just wasn't there. And when we weren't getting the rides, it was clear that, and actually that's why, and that was one of the reasons why we stopped going to markets and colleges that weren't of a certain size. So all of our colleges at the beginning were like Michigan State, Ohio State, but I had schools like Oberlin in Ohio, Wesleyan, Ohio Wesleyan, schools like that, much smaller, that we actually cut off negotiations with because they weren't big enough. It really just wasn't working, and that's kind of why when we finished the pilot, we walked our separate ways. As far as the number of cities, yeah, I mean, with the new operating model, the fleet manager, that does give us the ability to go into a lot of towns with just 50 to 75 scooters at max and have us be successful. And because of that, shedding all of the warehouse, all the employees, by hiring that fleet manager locally who is able to manage the program for us and make revenue off the program far greater than they would on a salary or an hourly basis, those programs have been successful with an average of, in a lot of places, just 2 to 3 rides per scooter per day. So I'm very confident there are enough rides that could easily get to that number. And a lot of those markets are in, some markets now, like Oswego is going to shut down shortly in the next month or two, or month and a half. Olean will do the same. And we've seen a drop off in some cities in the South. It's just that the weekends they go up, and then the weekdays are down a little bit, and we adjust the fleet towards that. But yeah, most of the of that 30, a lot of those are anywhere between 9,000 and probably 12,000. And there are quite a few that are in the 5,000 range, but that's more of a 4-season type of atmosphere for those folks. But yeah, it's worked really well for us. And again, for us, it's ideally in a lot of the northern cities I'm talking to, you have the perfect idea for a pilot in the sense that it really only is maybe 6 to 7 months long before winter interrupts the whole thing. And then there's an absolute evaluation period in the winter to see if it worked. Great. You have the data, we have the numbers to see how it worked, or try to make improvements on the program so to roll out the following spring. You've made adjustments to the program. Again, you're really just tied in for that short period of time. And then, the ability to get out of the agreement is there at any time. But, I think it's an ideal opportunity just to see how it could work. And if it's successful, then, we can make adjustments to the operating area, the slow zones, or the ride zones. All that stuff can be manipulated to, accommodate certain community reactions or areas where people would like to see more open up a little more, people are interested in seeing in their neighborhood or not. And so we can go either way. And that's one of the good things about it. We are flexible and agile in that regard.
Yeah, and they do provide an incentive for helmet wearing, and of course, the Walk by Council would work in conjunction with this to make sure that people are informed of our ordinance, for bicycles and rideable devices, and that we're going to learn too a lot from this, the Walk by Council and Middlebury Safe Routes and the town of Middlebury to navigate the roads and the sidewalks together. These vehicles are here already, and that's why I invited Adam Glazer to be here tonight to show you his scooter. It's not a bird scooter. It's a privately owned scooter. It's smaller, but he was very gracious in coming to his first select board meeting to meet you. He has a hearing impairment, so just be aware of that. And he can show you more about the scooter and how it operates, or answer questions you may have about how you think this is going to work in navigating our roads. He's been navigating our roads with this scooter, which is a smaller scooter, up hills, down Exchange Street, so with lights at night. Can you hear me speaking? Yeah, so a little bit. But I don't know if there's anything more that he might want to say or that you may want to ask him before we leave tonight. So just wanted to give you a chance, and just to say that I'm glad that it's been so thoroughly vetted, by the Public Health and Safety Committee and the Select Board. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I want you to know, for those who managed to read this, and I apologize for its late arrival, I do know how to spell errands. I basically have no objection to scooters and their use in Middlebury. I am leery about commercial development of scooters, and it's based on a summer that I spent on the West Coast, Seattle, which is hardly comparable with Middlebury. However, there are things that I think will prove to be similar. And that is, there's a large, although there are, in Seattle, there are definitely spots where you are supposed to leave scooters. And in the case of Seattle, e-bikes as well. It doesn't happen. I am very concerned, as are all of you and other people in Middlebury, about our downtown, which is rather fragile. Abandoned e-scooters are not going to help that. They are aesthetically and actually in the way in Seattle. And I think they would prove to be the same here. In Middlebury, we have a different kind of situation, and we've got human nature, and I, for one, am careless. I do not put things where they are supposed to go. Unfortunately, I'm told by my children. And I suspect that college students are going to be the same. What is their investment in following the rules? It's human nature, and it's a certain stage in life as well, I might add. And I think despite the efforts of any management group, it's going to be a very hard pull. My other spot on the West Coast was Orcas Island, which I will tell you is an absolutely wonderful spot. It is more similar to Middlebury. It is a bit more rural. There are issues with abandoned e-scooters in towns, but there are very few towns. What there is a tremendous problem with e-scooters on roads that were not built for either bikes or e-scooters. And it is a real problem. In that sense, we are similar here. And it gives me pause. I'm glad that you made it down Exchange Street, and quite frankly, I think probably Exchange Street is an easier street than some of the others that I can think of. So at the very least, what Jeremy was talking about, which was putting I'm not a computer buff, putting controls so that scooters could not go out of a certain area is certainly something that should be considered assuming this goes forward, with Tom Hanley. I think that the Montpelier question that I had has been more or less answered. It was not that I heard anyway, at the meeting that I attended on the 20th. I read the draft MOU, which seemed a bit sparse, but I'm sure that legal advice will pep it up for sure. I applaud the piece of it that says if there is dissatisfaction on either side, it could be discontinued in a relatively short period of time. I think that is something for the protection of the folks who would like to profit from this and for the town. At the safety committee meeting, I was sort of interested in this. There was a written comment that suggested e-scooters might be helpful to those unable to afford a car. This is not an operation that is aimed at lower income people. It's expensive. It needs to be in order for them to achieve their purpose, which is to make a profit. And they are quite frank, and I think it is a good thing to be so, that their purpose is to make a profit. And my guess is their purpose is to make a profit of a certain amount in order to make it worthwhile for them. This is not a small investment on their part. So I guess what I'm really saying is, if it is decided that we as a town should look at this and try it out, fine. I would want to be very, very sure that the college is pulled into this. This is ending up in Middlebury, in my humble estimation, because we have a college here. And otherwise we would not be, they're not offering it in Bristol, let's put it that way. So we want to make very, very sure that this is all been worked out and is simpatico, I guess is the word, with the college. It's a joint effort. It has to be a joint effort in order for it to succeed, both for those who wish to make a profit from it and to the town that wishes to be safe and have nobody get hurt. And then finally, I would like to say that while I don't agree with all of the decisions that you folks make, I congratulate you and thank you for serving. I've been there. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort and quite frankly, a lot of listening. And I guess that's what I've done for you tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Peg.
We
Is there-
also have Victoria DeWind.
Okay.
Hello, Victoria. You're on mute.
Hi, thank you. I'm pretty new to this discussion, so I apologize if things have been covered at another meeting. I'm just wondering about the scooters. Are they on street only, or are they allowed on sidewalks? Do they follow traffic rules and stoplights, stop signs, pedestrian right of way, that kind of thing?
So this is Jeremy from Burt, so I'll speak to that. No, they're not allowed on sidewalks. And yes, they must adhere to all of the, any traffic, the normal traffic laws that any bicyclist would, for sure, and any cars for that matter as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so police it would fall on the police to enforce any traffic violations or?
I would assume yes. Obviously, that's up to Chief Hanley and his staff, but yes.
And there would be pickup and drop-off places, or, I mean, I hear about them being randomly left on sidewalks, and actually I was just in Denver and saw them there, just, sitting all by itself on a sidewalk. So, and how do we keep these available to everybody and not end up all on campus?
Yeah, so what we would do is make sure that, first of all, well, the previous woman who had spoken about campus, that is essentially very important to have a relationship with campus, because they're going to have dealing with university campuses for a decade, selling in Zipcar. They definitely have their own perspectives on the way their campus should be and things like that. So they'll have their own, I'm sure, some set of rules and regulations and no ride or no, those kind of zones. So, yeah, what we do is definitely that the part of the fleet manager's job is to rebalance the scooters. So to take them from areas where they end up in the morning or in the afternoon and to rebalance them back into areas of popularity. So we would make sure that if scooters were, certain subset of scooters were ridden onto campus, to actually go get them and bring them back and put them in different areas so they would continue to get rides. That's one of the benefits of the fleet manager role, is that they get paid for every ride. They get a percentage of the ride revenue. So they're motivated to go get scooters. So if I would take one home for lunch or for dinner and it wasn't coming back, if it's in a neighborhood where I know it's not going to come back from, fleet manager will go get it and bring it back, because they don't want idle scooters. They want them to be in areas where they're going to be ridden, because once they start to realize the more they make more money by the fact they get more rides, it really does help prevent clutter and scooters ending up where they shouldn't be. And then the data, because all the scooters are GPSed, we can see where they get picked up and dropped off. So they'll only put scooters in areas where they're going to be popular, and definitely not put them in areas where they're not going to be, where no rides end up ending, because again, it doesn't behoove them to do that. They only want to follow the patterns of where they're being picked up and dropped off.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is that it, Victoria?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on, and I'll put you back in the attendee crowd.
So Jeremy, that is a question that I'd like to follow up on. I was in Austin just before COVID, and I was surprised at how many scooters were distributed around, and that is probably my biggest concern. Similar to what Peg described, we got a beautiful downtown and we're really working hard to keep it that way. Are there controls put in place that can help keep that more orderly, where they don't just get dropped?
So it's hard to compare Austin or Nashville or DC to what we'd be doing in Middlebury, in the sense of, the problem with Austin is that the city has seen fit to grant licenses to multiple vendors and allow them to put close to 1,000 scooters on the market or out in the street. So they've opened it up so wide. That's the reason why they're just, of course, there are a lot of rides, but there's just way too many scooters out on the street, because, once you say you can have this many, then vendors will continue to try to get more out there so they get more rides. One of the things that does prevent us from having a much smaller number of scooters out on the street, you would see probably, if there were 50 to start with, you could see anywhere at the top end, 25 to 35 every day. That's the top end number generally. And so with not only the fact that the fleet manager is active during the day to move scooters, to be able to address any problems, there's also what we have in the app itself called community mode, which allows any member of the public, they don't have to join to be a rider. They can download the app and still use community mode, which is what is the reporting tool. You can actually, if a scooter is misparked or damaged or in a place where it shouldn't be, they can simply, in about 20 seconds, they can get into the app, get into community mode, report it. It immediately shuts down the operation, so it can't be rented again. And the fleet manager is notified within seconds once the message is submitted, so they know that they have a scooter they have to move. And they're held to a set of KPIs, which basically, if they don't respond to that message in a certain number of minutes, then they get talked to about they need to have better response time, so they can go out and get that scooter and move it to where it needs to be moved. Education is a big part of it as well. Knowing where scooters can be parked and where they can't be parked is a big part of that. Being able to remove members from the program who continually break that are easily something we always do as well. Because again, we want the fleet manager and us do not want an adversarial relationship with the community and with the town itself. We want to make sure we're in good graces. So making sure we address those problems very quickly and educating our customers on where they can and cannot park is going to be an important part of that. And not only downtown, but I guarantee you campus they're going to have a big issue with certain areas of campus where if it's the Union or maybe one of the popular academic halls, they're not going to want scooters right up to the doorway. So we're going to have to set up specific areas where they're able to park and only able to end their ride in certain areas so that we avoid, clutter near the front of a building or overtaking a bike rack or things of that nature. So we can certainly address all those problems and make sure that we don't have those kind of issues. And having someone local managing the program, the community mode really helps us achieve that.
And have you received support from Middlebury College, Jeremy?
I have not. I have not spoken with Middlebury College yet, only because I wasn't sure where we were because of the appointments to get Middlebury College if the town wasn't in for it already. So knowing that if the town is interested in the program and wants to do it, and the MOU is something we're recording, then what we do is then go to Middlebury, let them know what's happening, get their thoughts on it, and see what their particular issues are and work through those. But work through those through the winter, so they're fully aware of it. So when we would come out in the spring, the program would be all set to go at that nature. So there's lots of time to talk to the Middlebury College to get their buy-in. But obviously having to get the town's buy-in first was the important part for me.
Any other questions or comments? Laura?
I think Peg's point about affordability was an important one, and it's true. We have Tri-Valley Transit, which provides free shuttle. You don't have to pay for that. Can't beat that. Bicycle, you don't have to charge it. It's simple and free. This, you do have to have a credit card. There are some ways to work around that. We talked about that in the Public Health and Safety Committee. And I know that Jeremy said that, even though there is an expense, the typical expense for the round trip, I think, would be $4.90 maybe. So that's still relatively affordable.
That's like it's like a 10-minute ride. 10-minute ride.
10-minute ride would be about that.
It's like paying for a cab.
Yeah, it's
definitely not low-income transportation. Yeah, whoever was trying to sell this low-income transportation,
So-
better pull that one off the list.
Right. So anyway, just wanted to
Yep.
mention that.
And anybody that does qualify for the community pricing, again, that's 50% off right off the top. So anybody that would qualify for that, we certainly give those folks that don't have a car that are on assistance the ability to use the product at half price.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board? Nick or Dan?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Pleasure of the board?
I'll move to accept Public Health and
Nick
Safety Committee.
has released his mic and I think is trying to talk to us. Nick? Nick, do you have something to say? Or you're all set? Okay.
You good?
So when you talk, we can't hear you, Nick. Nick,
I think he is on cell coverage. He's sitting.
yeah,
Now, Heather.
Yeah.
there. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. So it was a headphone thing. Okay. I'm not sure what the time lag was, but I think you keep saying my connection's unstable. I'm hoping it's talking about internet, not me.
I know it's you.
Okay. Thanks, friends. I'm okay with it. It's good.
Hey, Nick, one of the things when it's unstable like that will help is if you knock off your picture, so that it all goes to
I actually plan to do that on next comments.
Yeah, he's got.
You're breaking up again, Nick, just so you know. Oh,
Okay.
Okay, I move to accept the Public Health and Safety Committee's Recommendation to approve licensing for bird
I'll
scooters.
just keep the video off for this meeting.
Operate an electric scooter business in Middlebury for 1 year, beginning in the spring of 2022, subject to the successful execution of a MOU outlining terms and conditions.
We've been seconded. Any comments before we go? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I might need your video to
Aye.
give me.
He said aye.
You said aye? Okay, I got it. I'm gonna support it, but I do hope that we can make sure, my biggest concern is the clutter. And our sidewalks are not wide. And so, making sure that they're not cluttering up the sidewalks. So anything in our MOU that we can put in there that helps to do that would be very helpful.
Can I make one more comment?
Absolutely.
Sometime before spring of '22, when they come on board, it might be helpful to have a discussion around who will be evaluating the
How we evaluate.
yeah, who, like, will we put a little working group together to, maybe just.
Yeah.
If not anything, maybe like in March or, anyway. Is that something the public health and safety does? Is there a task force?
Yeah, that might be something where we could do Peggy, you want to be part of that group?
Oh, sure. Just a comment, and that is, I'm making the assumption that the college will be included in this discussion about whatever it is that is decided about putting this program into operation.
Well,
I mean,
Jeremy will go to the college and see if they're supportive of having scooters up on their campus. Otherwise, they'll have
fine,
to.
I don't need to know what
Yeah.
it is. It just strikes me that it is a very, very important element, and that it is important that the town not appear to have been made a decision without consulting one of the main partners.
Yeah, we work very closely with them, Peg. I appreciate your concern, but they will have to be geo-fenced off if they aren't supportive of it. So it's really imperative for Jeremy to sell it and figure out how it's going to work up there. I don't think we're in such support of it that we're going to carry the water on that one.
Nope, that would be on me, for sure.
Okay, so with that, we've got a lot of work still to do on the MOU, and I think, Chief, are you carrying the ball on that one, working on it with legal?
Yeah, it sounds like I am, yes.
All right, thanks, Chief. So now, yeah, well, thanks again, Jeremy. I appreciate you joining us this evening, and we'll be working with you to try to make sure that the MOU gets us both where we want to be, so that we can start the trial with kind of at least a clear possibility for both of us to make it work the way we would like to see it work. So I think that, nailing those things down in the MOU is going to be crucial.
Okay, I agree. Thank you very much for the time again, everybody. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if any other questions come up from anybody afterwards, please you can forward them to me at any time. I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Okay, Tom, I'm going to change you to attendee as well.
Hurt his feelings.
Good night now. Thanks for coming.
Okay, next is an operating agreement with Acorn Energy Solar for Bristol Community Solar Project. Including discussion of time of payments associated with the agreement. And the 30-day appeal period is October 1st. I know based upon a posting I saw on the Acorn Energy stuff that they're kind of hoping for a payment on October 1st. I do think there was some information in the legal review that the board should discuss. And so if we need to, we could move it into executive session, but we did share that.
I shared the gist of it with Acorn.
So, thoughts from the board? Questions?
Do you want to make that public, or do you want that confidential memo discussed in executive session?
If the board has serious questions about it, I think we should move it to executive session. And if there's,
Then should we move this to the end of the meeting? Should go into
it'll move to executive session. We'll pull it off from here. If that memo gave enough cause for concern to people, then
I think we should have a discussion about that, because the town council has had some opinions about it. So I think we should go into that session.
I concur.
come on forward here.
Sure. I'm Ben Marks, the president of the Acorn Energy Co-op, and the main reason to be here is for you guys tonight to have answers to any questions that you have after your discussion with council. I'm happy to be here for your executive session, or if you feel like you need to do that behind closed doors, I'm happy to wait till you're out. Kathleen did share a copy of, not the memo, but some of the concerns in the memo. And I think I got some pretty easy answers for you guys on those, in the sense of not lengthy. But when you want that information and when you want to have that dialogue is really up to you guys.
I think you can share with us right now your thoughts on some of those issues.
Sure. The council's first question was about financing costs. What if construction financing costs are greater than anticipated? And I'm going to sort of break the answer down that into three components. First of all, there are no financing costs because we're paying cash for this. So there's no borrowing, there's no interest on our part, interest payments on our part. So there is no cost to the financing. The whole point of our money raising model is to raise the money up front and not spend it till we have it. So in that sense, there's not going to be a loan that we have to go out to get to complete construction or anything like that. We have the money in the bank, less the portion that Middlebury has come in for. Second, the project's being built on a fixed price contract. So we may have shared with you that we are using something called the Vermont Small Business Offering Exemption, or the Vermont Crowdfunding Exemption, to the federal securities laws. And what that means is we have to put together an offering memorandum, which you guys have seen, that actually is for a certain amount. Like, we can't increase that amount without going back to the Department of Financial Regulation and say, oh, we actually need an extra $200,000. And so the sequencing of our project money raising and our marketing is, first we enter into a fixed price contract with our builder. Then we take the number that comes out of that contract and we put it in our offering documents. We go to the Department of Financial Regulation. They're the ones who say, you can raise this much and no more. We then go to the public and market the securities, which will raise the money that's in the offering memorandum. And when we have enough money to build the project, we have our closing, which is, we had our public closing about a month ago, end of September. So there aren't going to be any cost overruns because the contract is fixed. And I guess in this case, it's a what you see is what you get. Now, there are, of course, things that happen. Let's say the price of our inverters jumped by 30% or something like that. What the fixed cost contract says is that our builder absorbs the first 1% of those costs, and that we never absorb more than 3% of whatever the cost overruns are. So we really put it on our builder to give us a price that they think they can stick to, and they're committed to not submitting change orders for anything that run over 3% of the original value, which is built into the model in terms of what the amount of money we go out and raise. So there's no chance, I don't think, or very little chance, that Middlebury is going to suddenly get a bill in November for unanticipated costs. The third piece of this is that roughly half of those costs have already been advanced for our most expensive items. So there was a lead period of about 4 months or 5 months on the solar panels themselves. There was a long lead period for the steel, and our builder saw that coming down the pike, and he knew that if he waited for us to have our financial closing, that there was a good chance that those lead times were going to turn into increased costs. And so they actually advanced us the money to buy those items, or at least the first half of those payments. And then when the items arrived on shore, they said, well, in order to get them from the shippers, we need the second half of that money, and we hadn't had our closing yet. And so Co-op Insurance, who was our Series A investor, said, well, we were going to invest a certain amount of money in this project. We'll loan that to you today, and when you have your closing, you'll just convert our loan into the Series A membership that we were always going to have. And we turned around and turned over that money to our builders to release the panels and the racking from their sort of import impound that they were in. So I think we've done a pretty good job at managing those construction risks. And I think that I understand why your lawyer raised the questions that they did. But in this particular case, I just don't think that those are real risks because we can't raise more money than we told the DFR we're going to. The contract that we have is a fixed price contract, and so we're protected on that front. And in terms of the biggest uncertainties, in terms of steel and solar panels, which are in short supplies these days, we ordered this stuff so long ago that there's no chance we're going to be hit with a big bill. Those items are already on site as of today. And construction has started. So do you want me to pause there before I go on to the other questions?
Does anybody have any question on that particular?
So you answered the financing cost and the fixed construction cost. How about the annual maintenance cost can change or may change?
Right. So that's the second part, and I'm happy to go on to that. This is a much shorter answer. The annual maintenance costs are really pass-throughs to you guys. So the big ones are rent, which is once again fixed for 25 years with 2 5-year extensions, so 35 years. The rent is what it is, and it's not going to go up. Taxes that probably will go up because taxes always go up and rarely go down, but they will go up in a way that probably tracks inflation. Same for insurance costs and so on. The credits that the town's going to be getting as a result of this investment are based on utility rates, and utility rates also, in a gross way, also track inflation. So there is always a chance that there are going to be maintenance issues that we haven't considered, but the big fixed costs that are in the annual cost package, which is rent, taxes, insurance, and so on, I think are unlikely to go up by leaps and bounds unless something unexpected happens. Now, if, for instance, insurance costs go up, insurance doesn't broadly track inflation; it tracks pooled loss of a group, right? If those costs go up, the group is going to have to make a decision about what it wants to do. Now, for the first 6 years, we're going to be in charge of those decisions in terms of protecting the array. But after year 6, you guys are essentially the boss. You're the owners. So remember, we don't own this. You're going to own it. I mean, you're going to own 15% of it. And so all of the owners are going to be facing the same set of concerns about the costs. And you can get together and decide how you want to control them. Now, you could decide, for instance, to self-insure for up to the, essentially choose a big deductible for the project. Or you can shop around for a different insurance carrier than the one that we've chosen, or choose not to insure at all, right? I mean, all of those are viable decisions, but you're going to make them kind of as a mini democracy. You'll tell the manager what you want to do as a result of an annual meeting or some other governance process. But it isn't as if we're going to increase those costs and stick you with the bill. We're going to present you with our best guess about how to control those costs. And you're going to participate in that if it's a big enough issue that you think that it needs to be dealt with. Clear so far?
Ben, what percentage does the co-op own?
The co-op doesn't own anything. We're a manager only. So we got or will get, when the project goes online, a sort of success fee for developing the project of about $100,000. And we get an annual maintenance fee of about $7,000 the first year, and then that will go up $150 a year to kind of track what's currently inflation. But in terms of ownership, we don't own a single share of stock. That's not, because the only benefits from ownership are either financial benefits related to a tax offset, and we pay very little taxes, so the Series A membership isn't really appealing to us. And the Series B membership is really the only way you get your money back from that investment is by electrical credits on your meter. And since we don't have an office or a meter, there's no way for us to take electric credits as an offset against that. So we're really here as a facilitator. We're not here as an owner. That's the Series A shareholder or interest holder and the Series B interest holders collectively together.
Remind me then who the Series A was.
The Series A is co-op insurance.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What percentage do they own?
Well, for the first 6 years, they own 95%, I believe, of the voting equity, or 99% of the voting equity of the company. And the main reason for that is they need the ownership structure to not change until their tax credits and depreciation credits have been realized. So in terms of the voting equity, they own 99%. And the Series B members own 1% collectively. On the other hand, there's all kinds of stuff that the Series A member cannot do without a 75% concurrence, basically a supermajority of the Series B. And that laundry list is what you'd expect. They can't use the project for collateral. They can't sell it. They can't encumber their interests in any way. They can't make any pledges about what it's going to do in the future, and that sort of thing. They can't enter into a different kind of contract or take any action that would prevent you from getting your electric energy credits. They're basically a giant passive owner, if you will. Now, they don't participate in the day-to-day management of the business. That's what Acorn does for the first 6 years.
So for the first 6 years, while they're the 95%,
99, yeah.
99% Class A owner, Acorn is contracted to do all the operations and maintenance, and will set those fees.
The fees are in the operating agreement, so they could change if you all agreed to it by a supermajority.
Has to be a supermajority of the Class B.
For any change to the operating agreement. So the operating agreement cannot be amended without a 75% concurrence by the Series B members. So our maintenance fee, or our management fee, if you want to call it that, is really locked in. We can't change it unilaterally, and that's not based on inflation or anything. It's just a contractual number that's in the agreement.
And he said when he came before that after that 6-year time, the Series B investors can make a decision whether to keep you on at whatever terms at that point, or we could hire our own, after that 6-year time. That was.
Yeah, that's right. And that would be, I mean, after year 6, it's really a majority decision by the Series B. So after year 6, the Series A interest flips to be only 5% of the voting equity. And at that point, the Series B members really do control how the business operates. Now, you're not going to be managing it on a day-to-day basis unless that's what you choose to do. And you know, I guess we would pitch ourselves as good candidates for the manager's job if you don't have somebody else better in mind. But if you're not happy with how we manage the project, or if you're not satisfied that we've controlled costs in a way that is acceptable to you guys, the Series B members can get together and fire us pretty easily. I mean, you can call a special meeting at any time to do that. So.
I'm still not clear about the co-op. Do they have 99% voting rights, but how much do they own of this project?
The co-op, in other words, the organization that I'm president of and that will be managing this.
When we talk co-op, we're not talking Acorn, we're talking co-op fire insurance.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what we're
Too many co-ops. What they own is they own 100% of the Series A equity. If you sign the operating agreement, you'll be in a contract with them as Series B members. They own 99% of the voting rights.
Yeah, I got that. I just want to know how much of the actual, like we own 15%, 25%. We are buying that. How much have they bought in?
Let me see how I can explain this. The rights that you're buying when you own 15% of the project is the right to 15% of the array's output.
Yes.
Right? The co-op has 0. They don't take any electrons at all. Their only interest in this is in getting the tax credits that come from initial investment and the depreciation that they're allowed to take and that most private individuals can't. I mean, I think you have to be a company in order to avail yourself of that. So they invested a certain amount of money. They are getting tax credits and depreciation that exceed that amount of their investment. And their interest in the project is in that sense financial only. So they don't take any of the energy from the project. They're not an off-taker. And that's really the reason to have a Series A and a Series B members, is that you derive your benefits from the project in totally different ways. They can't get any electrons and you can't get any tax credits. I mean, you couldn't use them anyway, but one of the things that makes this an attractive investment for a town like yours is that towns don't pay taxes. So a tax credit as a federal incentive to build a project like this really doesn't work on municipal entities or churches or any other kind of not-for-profits, because a tax credit doesn't work as an incentive unless you pay taxes.
It's basically an investment. It's a way that they're investing.
To get tax breaks.
Yes.
Yeah, so for them, it's a purely financial play.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they would say it's a socially responsible financial play, which is part of the appeal to them. But in terms of the benefits that they get, it's really just, they get dollars back, or the ability to offset their own tax obligations. They don't suck dollars out of the project. The project really doesn't have cash flow in that sense.
And it's my understanding, if they did not invest as a Series A, this project would cost us a lot more money than it is now.
Yeah, probably about just shy of 30% more.
Yes.
So I have a question unrelated. So it says in our packet that 460 units. I can't remember, and I didn't look it up. Was that the 25%?
That is the 25% for my recent email with Mary Nestor.
So there is 25%.
No, I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I can't quote the numbers. The amount of your investment will equate to 15% of the project. The original offer that we made to you guys was to hold open between 25 and 15%. We didn't know how quickly the rest of the project was going to sell at the time of, well, not your last meeting, but the last meeting we attended. So we said we're willing to postpone a closing for your portion to account for the bond process. We don't know whether that's going to be 25%. We sort of min-maxed it, right?
Right.
So what was left after the sale to the public was 15%, and we basically shut off sales at that point. So the town's investment will be 15% of the project, and it's always dangerous to do
That's okay.
math on the fly.
Yeah, well, I confirmed with Mary twice that it was 25%, and she sent me that twice. So,
Well, I'll work that out with Mary, but the bottom line is that there isn't 25% of the project to sell you. There's 15%,
Okay.
which is probably less than your full bond amount, which was, I mean, at the time that you were warning the bond vote, there was no way to tell how much of the project was going to be left. So we artificially stopped the sales when we had sold 85%.
actually, I think we're relieved that it's 15%. So not arguing.
And I'm happy, by the way, to answer any questions you guys have. I just want to make sure you get the information that is responsive to your council's questions, so that if and when you go into executive session, you have that top of mind, as you will, so you can have an informed discussion about this.
Are there any other questions for Ben while he's here?
There are a couple of other questions that I can run through quickly from
Go
council,
ahead,
just so you have the Acorn's position on this. We talked about annual maintenance costs and tracking inflation. I guess your lawyer's worried that the panels could be less productive than anticipated. That's true of any solar array, not just ours. I would go so far as to say that when you voted to buy into the project and when your voters voted to support you in that investment, they understood that there's always a chance that the sun's going to shine a little bit less next year than it did this year, or that you're going to have an abnormally sunny year. But that the sort of overall averages we have a lot of confidence in. And I think if you talk to any owner of a home solar system, they would tell you that while there's month-to-month variation, overall the averages are a pretty good approximation of the original estimates, if the original estimates were conservative. Ours have been, which is why the two projects that we've had going have both produced either at or above our original estimates for power production. It's not a promise, but it's what we use for our modeling. I guess your lawyer was worried also that the net metering laws could change how solar production is credited. I guess that's true. I mean, the legislature can do anything it wants. But if it's true, it's going to be true for all net metered customers, which is an increasingly large political base of people. I mean, if you were to make solar production worse for them, you would be making this solar production worse economically for thousands and thousands and thousands of Vermonters. I mean, these programs have been very enthusiastically participated in by lots of folks over the last 15 years. And I don't think that it's something that the legislature is going to tinker with casually. Without going too far into how utility rates work, utilities tariffs are basically considered an open-ended contract. So it's like an open-ended offer. And if you say, yes, I want residential service, or yes, I want commercial service, or yes, I want to produce a project under the net metering tariff, you're basically accepting the utility's offer to take service or provide electrons on the basis of those tariffs. So if those get unilaterally changed in a way that makes things worse for you, that's technically a violation of the contracts clause. And it's the reason why when the PUC changes the net metering program, they always change it on a prospective basis. And they tend to leave projects that are in place untouched. And what I mean by that is we've had a series of solar adders that are incentives to build net metered projects. The solar adders have been decreased over time, but what the PUC has said is that if you construct a project under a particular regime, those numbers are good for at least the next 10 years. And they've done that because they know that nobody would invest money in this if the market were widely gyrating every year. So I don't really view a change in the net metering laws as a big risk to the town. And I guess I'm biased in this because we put in solar panels on our own home about 6 years ago. And we had every confidence that we kind of get the deal that we bargained for with the utility when we did that. And I'm confident that if you guys complete this investment, that you'll get that bargain too. There will be refinements to the net metering program and there will be changes over time, but I don't think they're going to be changes that are going to make you lose money on this investment. Your lawyer asked if you could seek a cap on annual maintenance costs to control your risks. You can seek one, but you won't be able to get it from us because our costs, I mean, most of what's in the maintenance costs are, well, we call it maintenance, but it's really all the costs associated with running the project. As I mentioned, it's insurance, taxes, rent, et cetera. It's expenses for the project that are pass-throughs from the entities that are collecting those things. So we can't cut you a break on taxes or rent. I mean, that's a contract, taxes or taxes. Insurance is the best rate that we can find in the marketplace. And our own fees are spelled out in the operating agreement and only go up by $150 a year. So from a cost control perspective, I think those are pretty well nailed down. I don't think you could do much. I mean, we've already agreed to control them. And if we continue in the job after year 6, that'll be a negotiation about what those services are worth to the Series B members and whether you can find them for less somewhere else. Elijah also talked about seeking more control over how the project's output is sold in the later years of the term. This is more of a tricky one. I'm not sure why he wants to do that. The amount that you're earning this year per kilowatt hour is based on a blended residential rate in GMP service territory, which is about 16 cents a kilowatt hour and change. So that for every kilowatt hour of energy that's generated from the project, you get 16 cents and you get 15% of that. The merchant generation rates are set in the marketplace, and long-term power purchase contracts that GMP enters into with, let's say, a wind turbine or a gas power turbine are on the order of 4 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour these days. I mean, maybe some. Saying, well, we'll invest, but we want to see the following changes, you're really talking about a very heavy lift before the project's even commissioned. And I can't make a prediction about what the Series B members would say to something like that. But essentially, they've all paid in their entire investment with the expectation that the operating agreement as it exists currently is the arrangement under which they're going to be doing business. And if you want to change the agreement in a way to make it more favorable to Middlebury or more favorable to the Series B members, it's really a retrade that's going to throw a huge wrench into the process. So I completely get that council has his own ideas about how the agreement should be drafted. But in a practical matter, it's a very, very heavy lift to get that done because there's so many people who have essentially put their John Hancocks on the bottom line and said, here's our money, go build it under these terms. And finally, he talks about, I'll just read this, given recent experience with construction cost overruns, seeking assurance that the cost control measures will be applied. I mean, that sort of takes us back to the beginning of the discussion, which is to say that the assurance we can give you is that the construction contract is a fixed price contract and that the largest single expense items in terms of capital investment have essentially already been made. And I think it's unlikely at this point that we're going to see a huge variation in the construction costs, but if they are, the entity, AES3, their obligations for those cost overruns are capped at 3%. So there's just really not a lot, there's no really where for those costs to go in terms of risk to you guys.
Okay, are there any other questions of Ben? I think he's pretty well gone through that. And so with that, I'm going to put a pause on this discussion. We're going to take that to executive session after the meeting. And we appreciate you being here to answer those questions, Ben. That was very helpful and informative. And we'll let you know if we have any other questions.
I also appreciated Ben's offer to stay while the board enters into a private session in case you had any follow-up questions. If Ben waited in the lobby.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I mean,
call him in.
The background to all this is sort of what are our expectations in terms of payment and money flowing and all the rest of that. It's our hope that we can have a closing on October 1st when your appeal period runs out. And one of the reasons why it's a great deal for me to have access to you guys later this evening is that if you do have any open questions, now is really the time to ask them because there's not too much time between now and the 1st.
And Friday?
Yeah, that's right.
That's why while you're waiting, then it would be great if you could confirm that 15% and get me a figure so that the board could authorize a check if it decides to go forward.
Sure. I feel like the number is right, but the percentage is wrong, but I'll get Mary on the phone and
Okay.
we'll work our way through that.
So I need that back, but that's.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ben. And you're going to stay around?
I'll be in the lobby.
Perfect. Okay. Next, I know we're going to go on to the library and a follow-up discussion to our re-engagement in the preliminary planning for the Ilsley Public Library renovation expansion project. And so we had some discussion about potentially moving it to a small group. And that came out of some brainstorming from our full-time staff. And what are your thoughts on that, Joe?
We're happy with anything that moves the project forward. And if staff and the select board feel that this will do that, then we're supportive.
I think our experiences as a small working group has worked really well on some other projects, at least to try to move something forward and pull all that information together. fewer people to sidetrack conversation. And there's been so much work already done on this that that might be a really good next step.
Well, and I think we also appreciate the idea of bringing in someone like Judith Harris with some expertise in this who might be, provide an objective evaluation of what's been done to help us frame things going forward.
Dana, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be exciting to be able to get started pretty quickly and move pretty quickly, which is what Joe and I would like to do. So I think it'd be wonderful.
I do think in convening a working group like this, if we could have a clear charge to the group, maybe a timeline, because we'd like to get going.
Yeah, we were hoping a relatively short timeline, not more than, I don't know, 2 months or something like that, something in the shorter range.
Okay.
And I think we've identified a couple of trustees who'd be willing to serve on this. I would be one, and Amy Mincher, who is here, would be another one. And if you have some thoughts on who might serve from the select board,
So
that'd
first,
be up to you.
let me bring the discussion then to the board. First, is the board supportive of that process, or any questions on it, tweaks or anything?
100%.
Can I make a couple comments? First, I like what Joe said, really like the idea of setting a timeline for this working group, or a time limit or an amount of time. I think that would be
Deadline to get back to us?
yeah, there you go, thank you. And also in Joe's original, or the trustees' original proposal, the first item was review and evaluate the 2017 report and records of previous library building committee. I think that's kind of the same thing as what's identified in the summary. But I guess I wanted to make it a little bit clearer, like, I just wanted to be a little clearer on what we thought the actual charge of the working, like, are we just, because this, I felt like between what Joe provided for a timeline and what Kathleen or someone had a history, we had a pretty good history of like a summary of what had happened. So maybe one area where I think Judy could really be a benefit to the group is looking at all the documents and providing a review and not necessarily a summary. Does that make sense?
Well, I thought it would be nice to have a tidy little document that kind of encapsulates all of the work of that previous committee and the work that Dana's done since then in reaching out to the community, and kind of ties it all together and makes a report like that DPW report that I had included in some of my correspondence, with some pictures, some explanations, and what we're looking for and the needs that need to be addressed going forward. That could be valuable not only for the volunteers on the committee, but in seeking proposals from engineering and architectural firms going forward.
Yeah, I think that's.
Could I ask a clarifying question? When you are seeking a summary of previous work, is it a list of the activities that the previous group engaged in, or
More like
their findings?
like the findings and the concepts.
Findings and concepts.
Yeah.
Any other questions, or did you?
Just one more.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
Judy obviously usually works for a fee and doesn't volunteer for this sort of thing. Do we have we talked to her on and given her an idea of time and cost? Just, I'm assuming you've done that maybe. Or...
I have spoken to Judith. She is available. She is interested. I didn't have any concept of how much time this might take, but her project management fee is generally $75 an hour. And given that we're looking at a 2-month timeline, was thinking a couple of $1,000
Okay.
would be a good estimate.
That seems reasonable. I have absolutely no complaints on any of the work that Judith has done for us, and was very impressed on what she helped us put together for the police and wastewater treatment adaptive reuse project. I mean, she really helped us get that to the construction, so I'm thrilled to have her be a part of it.
Brian Nick has his hand up.
Okay.
Well, first of all, Brian, I think you're, I am, you hear me? Is it, do you have my voice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I think that the small group makes a lot of sense. That's going to get the most efficient use and productivity. I think the only thing I would question, and I understand the desire to move this really fast, but I think the 2-month is probably a little unrealistic to do it right. 100% more to really do a good job, especially given everybody's schedules.
6 months might be. Yeah.
No, not 6 months. I'm thinking like 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah. It might be something Judith could weigh in on as well.
Let's call it 4 months.
I said Judith might be able to weigh in on the time frame as well.
There's nothing wrong with setting 6 months either and turning it around in 3.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, when you look at it, because 4 months takes you right through into the holiday period and our budgeting period. So, okay, so any other comments or questions from the board? If we're good with this, then I think the next thing is to,
Victoria DeWind in our audience has her hand up.
okay.
Do you want to say something else, or should I promote?
Well, I was going to go to the step of see what board members are interested in participating. But we could hear what Victoria's thoughts are. We're running really late tonight, Victoria, so
She may not be able to hear you as she's transitioning, so let her know once she can hear you.
Hi, thank you. I wasn't able to attend the meeting your last meeting on this. So I'm just wondering, is this committee going to sort of start from scratch, and or are they going to be working off the plans that were proposed 4 years ago?
Victoria, the whole purpose is to pull everything together of everything that's been done in the work of the prior committee, and then the work that Dana has done since her arrival, and use the springboard. So no, not to start from scratch.
Okay. Well, is this working with the same architect as before?
We're not to the architectural stage yet, I don't believe.
This is just a work group.
Okay, I back at the time it was being reviewed in the community, I had reservations about some of the design, and so I'd like to see it, start from a different place. I thought the last design was much more institutional and less community scaled, small towns community scaled, and I had energy efficiency concerns, and there was just a lot about it I didn't think really met the town's needs. And so my concern was, do we work off that design, or do we come up with something different?
I can guarantee you we're coming up with something different, because we've already said that design is achievable for the town's budget. So.
Okay, thank you. That was my concern.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you, Victoria.
Victoria. So then I'm going to jump right to volunteers from the board. Is there, so everybody who's interested, so I got Dan's hand up, Nick is interested, Heather has shown interest, Lindsay's interested.
Flash of interest.
Esther's interested.
So I'll withdraw, and in my conversation with Joe, I indicated that if there was at some point where it made sense for me to attend a meeting to look at something from an infrastructure perspective, I would be happy to do that. So I'm happy to let some of our newer members participate in that.
Okay, and I'm gonna let Dan give a comment here. Dan?
Yeah, I think, number one, I think it's really important. I'm not sure newness is the important thing here. I think it's important, number one, to have Nick on the board, on this committee. He's a real systems guy. He works in these things, and he's worked on this before. So he has a great knowledge, and I think it would be important that he gets onto it. And I would like to be on this. I haven't been able to be on any other infrastructure stuff. And I have a ton of background in project management and systems management, and I would like to be involved.
Okay. Let's just go around.
Were you interested?
We have enough people interested, so.
Well, nobody ever asks you, so
Well-
I'm asking.
Don't kill the couch.
It's awfully nice to do that, I think. Lindsay, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a wonderful project, and I feel like the library is really the gem of our community. And I want to be supportive in any way, but I you know, I'm happy with whatever the group consensus is. I think it's nice to have somebody on who has potentially, you know, that connection with the library with little kids, and is using the full gamut of what the library has to offer, and is thinking about those next steps. But yeah, I'm just very happy that there's so much interest. So if other people want to throw themselves into it, I'm in full support of whoever wants to do it.
Okay.
Lindsay does make a great point. While both Dan and Nick obviously are great choices as well, Esther would definitely bring a different perspective from having younger children and using the space.
I have a question about that. I'm not sure this is a question about who has kids and who doesn't have kids. I think this is a question of having maybe the most experience that we have in doing projects like this, because it seems like it's going to be fast paced. It's going to be reviewing a lot of previous work, and I think that's more important. I think it's you don't design a building because somebody has children. You design a building because with people who have experience in doing it, and that's the only reason. I think that's very important.
I hear Dan, but I also agree. I think it is important to have someone with a different perspective. I would love for Lindsay to go on. I can withdraw because I'm on infrastructure, but I support Lindsay going on as someone who also has a 6-year-old and kids, and has been through the, you had high school too, so you really use it on all sides. But I do think it's very important to have someone with kids on. Now, kids who are small now. Yes, Nick, you bring the experience, and Dan, you do too, but I think we have other folks who do too. So I think having a balanced team is more important than just experience.
So maybe as a, sorry. Yeah, go
So
ahead, sorry.
I'm going to move it ahead. So here's what we're going to do. It's going to be Dan and Lindsay. Nick is going to be out west for a couple months, and we're putting you on a really short timeline. I'd like Nick to know when you guys are meeting and give him an opportunity to dial in, but the limited connectivity is going to create some issues for a small group moving fast-paced. And Nick is willing to step aside. He texted me here. He's willing to step aside to give somebody else a chance to participate. But having his experience as a part of that, making sure when we're talking about reviewing it, you guys have all the documents and everything, but he was actually part of that group. And so I'd like to have him dialed in on occasion when it works for him. But if we're going to put you on a 4-month timeline, then that puts us out to, why don't we go 5 months? Because Thanksgiving and Christmas we got a lot of interruptions. So by the end of February, it would be really nice to have that report back from you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to fill the rest of it. That's your group to fill. But we'll give you the 2 select board members and keep us in the loop. What's going on?
And we'll check in with Kathleen on Judith's availability.
Yeah, she is available.
Great.
Nick has his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Nick has his hand up.
Nick.
Brian, just one comment here, and hearing the comments about the different perspectives and having children. I think we got to keep in mind what this is. This is not designing the building. This is actually just summarizing what has been done and looking at options to proceed forward, which would then include hiring a design professional and going through the normal channels and process to go from
Good point, Nick.
a concept to a reality. So don't sit there and think that this is actually where we're designing the building. That's not happening now. This is just really a summary of what has occurred and then to give some recommendations, really some options to go forward.
Nick, did you ever play the little 45s on slow speed? That's what we're hearing.
I actually have one of those 45 rings used to put on as a magnet on my refrigerator. And my kid's sitting there saying, "Dad, what is that thing?"
Love it. Okay.
All right.
Would you mind telling us in brief what Nick said?
What Nick said, he said that just to understand and make sure we're focused, that we're not designing the new building, we're recapping and making sure that we have that springboard position to launch forward by creating that the report of what's been done before and making some recommendations and refining those roles and missions. So, yeah. My brain works on slow speed. So
All right, good. Hey, if I could, one unrelated matter, I should have been here for citizen comments, but I think it would be good of the board to remember the passing of Carl Noise.
Yes.
We did.
A longtime member of the select board and town attorney for many years.
And good friend of many of us. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, for staying out so late.
Okay, next, and this is one that activity so bad because is the initial discussion of items for the negotiation for the renewal of the town lease of the recreation park for Madison Central School District. There were some concerns raised and primarily Nick, because of his experience, had raised some concerns. And we went with a 1-year extension and we need to buckle down and get things together so that we can amend it and do the new lease.
So a way forward with this in the interest of time might be for me to write out the concerns from last year in bullet form and then have the board discuss them at another meeting where Nick has good conductivity and perhaps he could flush out any of the bullet points of his concerns in advance of the meeting.
I like that. We're going to do that because Nick's central to this discussion and it's painful. So.
No offense.
Nick sometimes can be painful, so.
Sometimes.
No hand went up.
Okay, next is initial discussion of the maintenance and budget for Hammond Cemetery, the Bushy Cemetery and Washington Street Extension. As everybody read through the letter and the thoughts and everything, it seems to me like that would be getting into and adding a lot to the staff for very little potential gain. Is there anybody on the board who has got a burning desire to reopen that cemetery, or are we okay with just maintaining it? And I don't mean to pre-decide for you, but I was scared looking at how does that really pay for the effort to do it?
What was the lady's name again that wrote it? Was that?
Linda Williams.
Linda, I was gonna sign her up. We decided I was.
Oh, yeah, she would be a fantastic candidate.
That was my only suggestion.
She did a very nice job.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dow wrote that up based on her conversation with Linda Williams, just to clarify that. But yes,
Well, thank you for that.
we're very thankful to Linda for providing that information to us.
So the only thought that I could think of if we choose not to sell plots is, does the Bushy family, is there some way we can make provision that they can have, because that's where some of this came
Yes,
from, right?
Linda said that there is a nice plot available that looks like it's free and clear for them at the top of the knoll.
And we could set it, whatever we decide, we can make sure that they have access to that without having to sell to other people, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. I think I would be in favor of that.
And can we do that without having to meet the state? Okay, like we can grandfather them in because it's theirs. Okay. Or it was.
Well, as long as we're not selling.
Right.
I think that's the big.
Oh, okay, it's the sale.
Would be the big.
It's the sale
Get the
versus-
plat before we sell the plots.
I see, okay.
If we're going to business. I'll do that.
Right, I see, okay.
Okay, so then, I don't think we need any formal motion on that because we're just choosing not to do it. Right? It could be done at a later date, another board, they could reopen that discussion. Next is the follow-up on our retreat. And just to make sure that what I got out of that retreat and in the notes of understanding. For EDI, well, first on the housing, Jennifer Murray's in the planning group at the town, is working on a number of things. First, designing conceptually some new neighborhoods that work. Secondly, working on the designation of neighborhood development areas, and areas where we could have dense development and it wouldn't have to go through Act 250. The town's own zoning processes are sufficient to handle that if it's within a neighborhood development area. And some amendments to the town's zoning bylaws. And those activities seemed like things that could help promote the growth of workforce housing by making it easier and more clear areas that we want to promote it and making it more feasible for people to do it. Is that what you got out of it on the workforce and housing portion of the discussion?
I did. The only thing I felt that day was not everybody got a chance to talk. We didn't have enough time. So the presentation from Jen lasted more than an hour. Then we had little time to actually discuss. I do agree with the next step on this, the NDA designation and all those things. I agree with those.
Okay, and then on the EDI she's really strongly in favor of a feasibility study, and we had comments both ways. One of the things that scared us on the feasibility study was she mentioned like a 5-year thing, but in reality, if we chose to fund it, she indicated it's really more in that 1 to 2 year window. Working it in with the work that she's got going on the zoning bylaws and the NDA designation and some of the other stuff, it was a question of which way we would prioritize and how in doing that. But is the board in agreement that if we were to do something to the EDI, that our next step would be a feasibility study and then to look and see how we would fund it? Or I'm not saying that we have applied the funds, but was that our?
If you're asking if we are going to do it.
If we were to do that,
we
we
want the
would
feasibility
want to do the feasibility study next.
So feasibility study, is that $100,000?
That's the $95,000 estimate.
I'm hesitant on spending that much money without knowing are we going to make a progress after that in this project, or is it going to be a deadline after that? I would rather bring it to, Nick has always said that we should bring it to a developer and have them come up with a plan. Maybe they will spend the money instead of us. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I don't have an engineering background, but I think at least attempt to find some developers who are willing to take us on and give us some ideas without spending that much money.
Can I make some comments?
Yeah.
So first, I think before I made a decision one way or another on the feasibility or like what Farhad is suggesting or what Jennifer's option 2 in her presentation was, I really would like Kathleen to have a chance to give us some idea of staffing. The current understaffed town manager's office, I don't see as having the space to do this project, to even the feasibilities, to everything. And I really think we need to consider hiring some additional help to move this project forward. If we want to move this project forward, I think that's a next step for us, even if we're choosing the feasibility study. I would like to see what the recommendation is on time and cost with that. I would like to see the personnel committee have a chance to review it. If we wanted to move ahead with it and we put that money for a person in the budget for the next fiscal year, you know, that would have to get approved in March, obviously. If it got approved, we would need to advertise for that position, I would say May. They couldn't come online until July, because that's when the budget takes effect. We're still looking at least a year before that person could kind of manage a feasibility study and all of that work. So I'm just gonna say, I don't think I have enough information to make a decision right now. Does that seem fair?
So
I-
your
Go ahead.
thing is, it was for her to bring forward what it would take for staffing and funding and timeline to do a feasibility study to take it to the next step.
Yes. And then do we want to add that into the budget?
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing two different
Okay,
ways.
okay.
Because I don't think there was enough support. I had said that I was interested in pushing forward and getting a developer in, but I don't think there was a majority board support, and I think Preston, Jen, she really argued strongly and for a lot of valid reasons for the need, if we were gonna do something there, to get the town on board before we bring a developer in so that we don't get egg on our face a second time. And that really rang true to me. And I think for us to decide whether we're gonna go that way or not, if that's the way if we're interested in doing something there, I think that the board's majority's support was to look closely at it before we go to the next step. Then we need to hear from Jen these things about what's it take for staffing, what's that look like for funding and all that, and then we decide, do we want to put that many resources towards it? Is that that's kind of what I got out of it, and I don't know if that's.
I guess I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of developing the EDI property, but I just am feeling a little bit like the resources we need to add on to do the project right now may be more than I want to spend.
Yeah.
And so slow it down a little bit for me, so.
I thought Kathleen had agreed that she was going to do some type of personnel analysis and analysis on what staffing she needs for all the projects and what we're looking at in the future. And I think that's very important for us to understand what we have in the staff and where we need more staffing. I can't imagine that putting out this for this proposal here for a $95,000 contract is going to take a whole man year of somebody working on this all the time. And how does all this fit in with Jen's work and Kathleen's work and all the shortfalls we currently have in positions? So I think the first step here is to understand, have Kathleen tell us where we are with staffing so we don't consistently come up with these issues that, well, we can't do this because we are concerned about staffing for doing a project. So let's start there. And I'm also, I'm for getting this EDI project off and running as quickly as we can. I agree with what Brian says, but we really need to understand the staffing and get that off our to not make it so we don't start anything.
Okay, so I think we're all saying the same thing, that we did come out of there with at least the majority interest of looking at what that would look like. But I don't want to ask them to spend all that time laying out what the staffing would take and trying to figure out the time and everything just for busy work if we're not interested in doing it. That's why I'm asking, trying to confirm, because Kathleen said that would probably be the next step. But before she spends all that time, if there's not majority support to, if we have the resources and it looks like a good path to actually do it. If there's only 3 board members that are interested, I would say to Kathleen, don't spend your time laying out what that staffing plan looks like.
Well, I certainly support it, so.
That's what I'm trying to ask.
I guess my thoughts on the staffing plan were, I don't want the staffing plan to just be focused on EDI. I'm really looking for, you know, what's the trade-off? If we're investing time, energy, and money in EDI, what's getting put on the back burner? And to me, those things that are now designated potentially back are, I think, more important than moving this project forward at this particular time. Meaning the NDA designation, you know, setting ourselves up to build the housing that we need so critically. You know, that's where I would like to see us put our energy. I understand that these two things could potentially happen at the same time. I would just like to hear from staff that, like, these two things can happen at the same time without putting an undue burden on the staff we already have. And if they can't, you know, I think the slow road with the EDI at this particular junction is a better road than trying to push when we just don't have the resources to do it.
We need to hire resources if we don't have resources. And it needs to be budgeted.
And we're already under the gun to get that into January. Because our process has always been, any proposal in the budget for personnel goes through and is vetted by the personnel committee before it's added to the budget. So that means the personnel committee should be reviewing that like now, you know, in anticipation of getting it in the budget and getting it before the voters, you know, in the review of the budget before town meeting is in January, right, Kathleen? So I think we're already putting an undue burden on staff, asking them to meet that timeline. So
I don't think it's gonna happen next year for sure.
Right.
So, you know, let's bring a little bit of reality to it as well. You know, how long has it taken us to get a sidewalk put on Exchange Street? So
What sidewalk?
have the money, we have the plan. So, why don't, so Kathleen and I will, as part of our laying out the staffing future, we'll also look at what kind of hours some of these projects would take. And so when we start looking at the budgeting and whatnot, and if it doesn't, you know, it's the type of thing that sometimes we're looking at bringing on, we've brought on a position, but we've done it over a couple of year time where we budgeted part of it one year and another part the next year. But, you know, we'll have to look at it, because you got to remember Kathleen's also working with transition of her staff at the same time.
Sure, and she's understaffed in
Yes.
that area right
We
now.
struggle to hire.
So, and it's a tough time to hire,
Right.
so I just wanted to make sure that that's what we heard, and so, you know, the next thing is to actually look at what's a reasonable timeline on some of these things, and what's it cost, and what's the staffing requirements, so that we can, then it's a function of prioritization, and whether we can actually afford to do it.
And I guess I mean, this is premature, and I understand that we don't have this information yet, but, you know, we own this property outright. We're looking at, you know, a handover sometime down the road to a private entity. What do we stand to gain on this? Like, bare bones, back of the envelope, you know, as we talk about investing money into it for something that will eventually not be ours. I want to know that the taxpayers are going to get those funds back out of the project. I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
I would just like to know that.
That was the type of thing we were talking, and it might be more in the feasibility study based upon the potential designs, what's the incremental taxes, so.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing was that I left you with there was the board-on property. Any thoughts on that? Asked everybody to think about it.
I mean, I can be persuaded. I'm not super excited about buying a property and then not knowing how fast we can resell it, or what kind of profit we can make on it, or if we can make a profit on it. You know, I'm leaning towards letting them just put it on the market and sell it. I can be persuaded. I really want to hear what everybody thinks on this, but at this point, I just don't see why we would invest staff time into it, other than we would have a little bit of control over who we sell it to, but I don't feel good about that without knowing more details that we don't have, so.
Yeah,
I agree with that. You said last time that we have too much on our hands anyways. This is something, it's not like a short sale from the bank that we're gonna get half the price of it. So I don't think it's worth our time to. If ACCD wants to buy it, they're more than welcome to. I heard they're interested in that, so.
Hey, Brian, you're the one that came up with this, came up with the idea of doing it this way. Can I hear your thoughts on what you think, if we should do it or not?
My only concern was to ensure that the ground floor is retained for, that's our commercial space. And I don't think we have any controls if we aren't part of the process of getting somebody into there. And I was just interested in maybe getting an RFP out for, basically put it on the market as a through process, and people would investors would share with us, kind of like what Middlebury College did with the mill.
Yep.
They actually did not sell it to the highest bidder. They sold it to the best use.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
And interest with the board on property was similar. If the state would allow us to be that intermediary to ensure that it was, I don't think we don't have time to change the zoning and whatnot. One of my first question on this was to go to Jen and can we control the use, and we can't. So it's too late. I kind of scoffed at that because I have to get, for my real estate that I own, I have to get approval of use whenever I change the use. And yet, for some reason, that property doesn't need to, so.
Well, I agree with you. I like your idea. I like the idea that it gives us as a town more control of what goes in there, particularly that first floor. And I think that's a good idea. And I think it's something we should consider doing.
so who writes the RFP? Who puts it out there? Who collects
I think it's a
responses?
very brief thing, that I guess I would need to think through that, but I'm not looking at a long process. It's almost the type of thing, if there was a real estate agent that was willing to work for a flat fee to handle it.
So your suggestion is we buy first, then put it on RFP?
I think it's all continuous part of the same process. If the state, because the state hasn't got, this is the type of thing where we have to tell the state we're supportive of this process, and they have to get FHWA approval. I think it's also the fastest way to get somebody into that property and have that property fixed up. Anyways, I don't think there's board support for it. I'm not seeing board support for it, so.
I think I have too many questions to,
Yeah.
to be, I mean, so I just don't get the timeline. Would we buy first and then we put out the RFP?
We would get, what I propose is that we wouldn't have to pay them for 6 months. So we would make an agreement to buy, it'd be, my idea
So
was.
like a 6 month contract with the state?
Yeah.
And then if,
Then we back out if we don't find an interested buyer.
is that Is that what you're thinking? We
Well,
can back out?
it would be subject, to them giving approval, if that was what the desire.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing is, my two big things are, again, staff time and, us being stuck with a property that we can't.
That's my biggest concern. If we are buying it and we're sitting on commercial properties now, so even though that's zone residential still, and the condition of the property is not the greatest, whoever buys it have to spend another $400,000 to make
Big
a whole, right?
renovation. Yeah.
So that's, to me, is, if what you're saying is, a 6-month contract with the state where we try to offload it without any risk involved, I'm all for that. I'll support that.
Yeah, that I would be much more comfortable with, but again, I don't want to keep piling things on, because even small things sometimes take a lot of time. So I'd like that to factor into the calculus, because we're already, I really think staff are feeling crunched even if they're not complaining.
I don't think it ends up being a small thing, because you've got to have legal counsel to do an agreement with V-Trans and make sure the towns, here we are talking about risk on the solar. For me personally, this has way more risk than that solar project. And then you've got to then put your RFP out, and you've got to solicit those, and you've got to make a choice. Who makes that choice? Are we putting another working group together and we're doing this all in 6 months? Well, we're also doing budget and town meeting and.
Okay, so let's.
I just don't think the timing is
I'll
right.
ask us to consider it, and let's just, so we're gonna go on the plan of prayer that, what we get in there is we're acceptable with.
So another alternative, if Nick has contacts with developers, can you, and that seems like a prime opportunity for a developer to make an investment and turn that into a property that a new business could use.
Then again, that developer will contact the state, and that's their business. We have nothing.
Right.
But the state there's a special way they can't go through the sales process they normally would, because
Okay.
this is FHWA. That was my concern.
I'm sorry.
There's preference to certain buying categories in the
Okay.
federal process. So.
That federal something.
Okay, we're gonna move on to check warrants. Ron?
Okay, I move to approve total expenditures in the amount of $635,800.68, consisting of $529,042.15 for accounts payable and $106,758.54 for payroll for the period of September 15, 2021 to September 28, 2021.
Second.
Moving and seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is that Nick on 9891?
Okay.
Oh, good. Okay, board member concerns. Lindsay?
I don't think I have anything. I hope everybody's having a good start to the school year, and yeah, I'm ready to go home.
I'm all good too, thank you.
Esther?
Yeah, no words, but I'm happy to see it there.
Dan?
I'll pass also.
Okay. Nick, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear this better?
Yes.
I tried to get to the district ranger station in time for the meeting and I didn't make it, so that's why I was doing that quirky communication. But anyway, I guess the one thing I want to say is that, with the process we went through, how's that sound? With the meeting we had on the 21st, I thought that was actually, quite well done. And one of the things that was interesting about that meeting is it's probably the first time that I can think of in a long time when the board actually acted in a really significant deliberative role trying to figure out a complex problem. So I think
Yes.
everyone who participated, I think you deserve a lot of credit for that good effort. So it was something I'd love to see happen on other events in the future where we can just focus on one event and just have a really good, solid discussion without feeling rushed to move on to something else. The one thing, and I was in between these communication links, but to possibly also be a consideration for EDI and could be an inexpensive way to approach it is that the idea of setting up a colloquium of potential architects, design teams, and developers and have a half-day session or so and have them come in and give their opinion on how they think we could move the EDI and some other projects forward, especially show them the master plan and some of the other things that we want to do and gain the opinion of the people who actually do this and not try to box anybody into a corner. I think that could then lend to the answer as to whether we proceed with a study or we proceed with some other alternative. And that seems like a fairly inexpensive thing that could be readily moderated and lead to a direction forward and not shut the project down or delay it. So that's my opinion on that one. But other than that, I appreciate Joe McVie mentioning Carl Noiza. He was just a long-term, amazing member of the community. When I first came on the board, he was actually the town's council. And as I recall, and I mentioned this when we gave him we dedicated the town award to him a few years ago. And when Carl would first start discussing things on legal, I remember many of us just sort of glazing over trying to figure exactly what the guy was saying. And then all of a sudden he would say something and it tied it all together and we realized this guy was so brilliant and he helped us understand what was going on. So he was a tremendous guy and sorely will be missed by the community and his legacy will live on in Middlebury. Other than that, nothing else.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Yeah, I do have a question. Off of thinking about the retreat, are we going to be doing another one? I guess because it felt so incomplete, and I know we started talking about things here in this meeting.
I'd like to try to add some stuff to the board meetings because we got a lot of stuff coming up with the budgeting and everything. But if the board would like to do another retreat, we can try to get another retreat scheduled in. Yeah, I think that process is nice to get off and just to kind of have open conversation. And I recognize that, because it was so crucial to the discussion, I think it was important to have Jen do that presentation.
Yeah, I agree.
We understood where she's coming from and what she's thinking and kind of share that. We don't get that chance with Jen on a frequent basis.
Yeah. And she's doing big things. I mean, I'm really impressed with what she's got going. I will say, if we're talking about retreats, just that it's much easier for me to schedule a separate retreat than for meetings to run far over. I don't know about everybody else, but by this point of night, I get a little befuddled. So I'm open to that going forward.
Heather?
I would like to make a request that in the next agenda, we schedule a little bit of time to refresh ourselves on the Selectboard operating principles. A couple of comments made in the retreat. It felt like we were potentially coming very close to the line on what we agree on our operating principles. And I would just appreciate it if we could take 5 minutes in the next agenda and refresh ourselves on what's acceptable for the board to do in some cases.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yep. And then I have one thing I'd like to run by you all.
Mm-hmm.
So I started with a bridge and rail thank you letter to the community to put in an op-ed. And then we had our retreat, and that's kind of still in the process of finalized in my letter, and I thought it would be nice to just kind of tell it as part of that, say what we were prioritizing as the next. And let me just read what I have so you can tell me if this is okay with you or if there's things you want me to pull out. So as you said, over the past decade, we've done so much to improve town services in the downtown, and we've done it with civil discussions, though often contentious, and thoughtful solutions. With many of our infrastructure issues now behind us, it's time to look ahead to resolve other issues that are not as tangible. Our lack of housing stock for young families and new workers, and our need for economic development and diversity both rank high. The select board is well aware that these two issues are vitally important to the town's future, and our intent is to address them with the same resolve as we have our infrastructure projects, seeking viable and practical solutions that attract majority support. At our recent board retreat, we discussed how to tackle increasing workforce and low-income housing stock. And during our discussion, we recognized the solution is in large part dependent on private investment. However, we have tools to help. Our town planning team is working diligently to establish a shared vision and the conditions which attract growth in this regard. And you can count on the board to support and promote these activities. This includes some zoning changes which allow for greater densities, expanding our designated neighborhood development areas where developers can work with town zoning and bypass the need for Act 250, envisioning new neighborhoods, and possibly a feasibility study for the town-owned parking lot and waterfront behind our town offices of the downtown master planning process identified as a potential development site. Our sense is the most productive tasks we can do to increase our workforce and help develop our downtown are through designing actionable ideas for several projects and then increasing outreach to developers. Many of these tasks are multi-year and some may require additional staff or financial support to accomplish.
You left us all speechless.
Well, that's the part about the future.
Yeah.
The other is a thank you, which is just a thank you to the greater community for supporting the work the board has been doing in our 4 years. And is that acceptable to put out?
I mean, I think that's an accurate representation of where we are at the moment.
It's not making any promises, but it's kind of giving them what we're working on. Because we're going to be bringing out like the changes in zoning. We're going to be looking for people who have the hearings and stuff like that. I mean, it's not like we can unilaterally do that. But they're
So I'm curious why the comment about infrastructure issues behind us.
Well, I know you got the water projects and stuff, but look at all the other things we've done. We did the Cross Street Bridge, we did town offices, we did the police station, fire station, municipal gym, and now the bridge and rail. So we do have, we're never going to be done infrastructure, but we've done a major lift on infrastructure.
We have to acknowledge what we have done.
Yeah.
That was a big achievement now.
Can we just maybe reword that a little?
Absolutely.
It sounds like
they're all done.
It sounds like that we're all done.
We're done.
And I struggle with that a little bit. I would just.
As the chair of the infrastructure.
I would say.
I said many of our infrastructure issues behind this. So I'll work on that. I'll send it to you to look at.
Yeah, just maybe just reword that a little bit. So it.
Yeah.
I get the impression that we have accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's great to mention that, but don't give people the impression that we're done.
No, we're never done.
Okay. And then on the feasibility study.
You want me to pull that out of there? I said possibly.
Yeah, I know. I guess I feel like that may be just a little bit premature. I mean, because what Nick just said, I don't know, but maybe the idea he had is something to talk about some more. I just feel a little bit like I don't have enough information yet. I'm cringing at the idea of spending that kind of money on a feasibility study, not really understanding exactly what it's gonna get us. I don't know,
Yeah. Would it be maybe possibly doing something with the town-owned parking lot? Or do you want me to pull that whole thing out of there? Just because we're talking about it and.
I mean, I think it's a project that people know has existed for a long time as an idea, and I think unless we're ready to move on it, it doesn't make sense to bring it up in this context,
Okay.
and rather help people focus on the stuff that is definitely going to be accomplished over the next year. And get their support behind the zoning changes and the reasons behind them, you know.
because
And-
that could potentially get people up in arms a little bit. Sometimes when we talk about making changes to zoning, that brings people out and
I think that's going to be a big lift, to be honest with you.
and
But
concerns about that. So
I think that's a big lift.
getting people on board with the reasons why we want to do those changes would probably be good.
Okay.
Yeah, and tying it back to, you know, as you've done, to us acknowledging that the workforce housing is such a challenge for so many people. And I think being able to have that conversation publicly first before we launch into another major infrastructure thing will be a good way of laying things out. In my little opinion.
Any concerns, Dan?
No, I passed. Nope.
Okay, I'll address those things and hopefully you don't shoot me when I.
Can we see a copy of it too, maybe? That-
Yeah,
You could email.
I can blank copy everybody.
I do better reading than I do listening to something like that.
My final one, I'm gonna try to finalize it in the morning, so I'll send it to everybody.
When you're planning to send it off to the paper?
Maybe just to make sure that you're not violating any open meeting laws, send it to Kathleen and have her send it out to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's you're writing and everything, so it's, you know, take it with a grain of salt. It's not going to be a group effort chopping up something that you're writing, but I think the concerns that are being expressed are viable. So
No, totally.
I mean, you're.
Okay, so I need somebody to take us into executive session.
When are you planning to send this to the paper?
Sorry?
The letter and the op-ed?
What about it?
When are you planning to?
I was gonna submit it tomorrow.
okay.
In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of contracts would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its strategy if it discusses the contracts in public.
Second.
Second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss contracts under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are in executive session at 9:30.